Let me tell you, I didn't know this individual in the screen, and I met him yesterday, and I learned something about him. He said that he was a soccer player, a football player, right? Football, the football we play, right, in Latin America, with our feet, not with our hands. That's the reason it's called football. And he said that he would play with Diego Maradona. And you know what he said? He was not that good. So, my friends, get ready for an amazing session with Jorge Titinger, CEO and founder, Titinger Consulting, and author of the book, Differences That Make a Difference. Jorge is a highly analytical and incisive strategist, leadership consultant, speaker, and board member. He's an accomplished board member and C-level executive known for producing results, but developing strategies, building effective leadership teams, driving innovation, and implementing initiatives spanning all business areas. He's also a LX Council, is that correct? Licensed partner, someone is calling me, where he leads a group of CEOs and business owners from different industries in their journey to maximize their success. Please join me in welcoming Jorge Titinger.
So, thanks for having me here. It's true what I said, but I got to clarify it. You know, actually, I'm Peruvian. I played soccer in Peru. I played for the junior national team, you know, so when Diego would have been 6 months older than me. So we played several times against each other. And when he was 16, 17, he was very little. That's what I said. So it was easy. It was easy to push him out of the way, you know. You know, I told Marcelo that he was incredible with his feet, but you also need to be able to stay standing up on the field. So he, as you know, he turned out to be a way better player than me. So, you know, you got to kudos to him. Anyway, now I can see people. Anyway, so thanks, David and Angeles Investors for having me here. And have the opportunity to talk about the work that I've been doing now for about 10 years in a lot of detail. And a topic that is actually today very controversial. Okay? This is a little about me. We photoshopped that picture to make me look younger, but did it work? Okay, so I have a request. See that view? Don't pay attention to it. Pay attention to the slides. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the, you know, the journey. You know, so how many have met or know Pedro Espinosa? A few of you. So Pedro is a fellow Peruvian. He's a millennial, and which is why I have gray hair. Working with him for a year and a half. And we met about 8 years ago and decided to write a book. And we were trying to figure out what is a relevant topic that different points of view could benefit from. And we chose DEI as the topic. And, you know, having views from a baby boomer like myself and a millennial, and we figured it would be an interesting conversation. And we did not intend to do this, but we ended up interviewing 150 executives, senior leaders, both in business, in politics. The problem was that, you know, every time we talked to somebody, they said, oh, you must talk to so-and-so and so-and-so. So, you know, I think our target was about 30 people. We ended up with 150, which was a lot of work, because then you have to actually validate the quotes they gave you, make sure that so it took forever, right? It took about 2 years to actually get the book written. And it was a very successful book. It won the best book of current affairs in 2020. And the topic was how the, okay, here. You guys can hear me if I move? Okay. So, all right. All right. Better? All right. The topic was, how does DEI impact the business results? And remember, the book was published at the very end of 2019 when DEI was a mandate for companies, for boards, et cetera, right? Public company boards who had more than 7 members had to have at least 3 females on the board. Then they added 1 underrepresented minority. And it's pretty interesting which minorities were claimed to be underrepresented, because in many parts of the world, they were actually the majority. But anyway, and today, it's a very politicized topic. It actually has a ton of negative connotations. And I hope we get to talk a little bit about that. We had intended to write a second book on the progress that the world had made on DEI. And of course, the pandemic happened and it changed things completely. So the second book is not quite a sequel to the first one, but it's kind of redefining the changes that the pandemic brought into the space and how it affected the world we live in now, right? And I want to make a disclaimer, and I'm sure you're going to read this because I want to make sure I get it right. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in both books, we're not referring to checking the box on fulfilling a quota. And I think what got the world in trouble was too many companies were basically doing that just to check the box and fulfill a quota. What we're really talking about is the intentional focus on inclusion that brings in diverse perspectives, experiences, and ways of thinking, not just in representation, but also in participation, right? So there's many companies that, oh, we have 45% females. Yeah, they're all at the very entry level. Not what we meant by diversity, okay? Now, you do have to have somebody diverse to include them. So diversity is very important, but it's not sufficient, okay? And the DEI that I'm talking about is what I call the true DEI, is creating an environment where different viewpoints are not only welcome, but actively integrated into the fabric of the company. Okay, so that's what we wrote about. I think most companies that I've been talking to lately want to maintain, the ones that took DEI seriously, want to maintain their efforts, and they might need to change the name because the name has fallen into, ill representation. But anyway, the effort is definitely very important. All right, so as I said, what you name it matters, but how you do it matters more. And let's start with what I call the definition dilemma, right? So what is it, who do we define, right, as somebody who needs to be included, right? What about, gender is going way more complicated, right? Only 8% of the companies that talk about DEI, by the way, include age diversity in their plans, right? 8%. When the reality is that demographics of age differences are so impactful in the market that if you don't include them, you're doing yourself a disfavor. For example, today, 75% of purchasing decisions in the world are made by millennials. 75%. Do you know how many companies have millennials on their boards? Less than 20%, unless they're a millennial company, right? So very, very small numbers. So those kinds of things were the type of things that we wanted to bring to attention when we talked about DEI and its impact. And the second thing is the metrics, right? The metrics are super important. I like to say, in God we trust, everybody else bring data, right? And the metrics can be manipulated to tell a story that isn't necessarily true. So for example, companies that say we have a great participation of females in our company, but you need to know whether they're at all the levels or only at certain entry levels, whether they get promoted, paid the same, all those things matter. Very easy to manipulate metrics. So you need to pay attention to that. You need to ask, I like the 5 whys, right? It's 5 times why are you doing this? So it's super important. And then post-pandemic, how did this change? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the major change post-pandemic was the real significant shift in trust, okay? We as a society lost the body language clues that we were used to seeing. So when the world shifted to work from home, there was a big change in how do we trust? Do we trust? You know, there's a great book called The Digital Body Language. So think about that, right? And the fact that companies really need to go develop their own body language to understand when they communicate digitally. So anyway, those were some of the key themes that we worked on. And let's, definitions are super important. Let's start defining things correctly. So at least this is what I mean when I talk about these things. And of course you can, I don't think too many of them are that different, but diversity, right? So diversity is reflecting the mixture of differences and similarities that exist in your society, in your company, okay? So, in the States where we have a real hodgepodge of races and cultures and stuff, we invite for a significant probability of diversity. When you go to Asia, how many people have done business in Asia? Not a lot of diversity racially, right? Very little. So asking them to have significant participation of underrepresented minorities, etc., that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Gender is everywhere, so that's something that's actually, I think, very important. But anyway, so that's how we define diversity. Now, what we found when we were writing the book, because the book initially was just D&I, right? We hadn't included the E in our initial thoughts about the book. I'm spying on the people on the left side to see if they're looking at this. Yeah, there you go. Got to keep everybody in check. We found that, everybody that we talked about said, the real issue is inclusion. It really, you could be diverse and not inclusive, and it doesn't matter. And so, but like I said earlier, you need to have some diversity to include them, right? But the real effort was inclusion. And then as we were continuing to talk to people, it became pretty obvious that it was the only way to be inclusive is if you had equity. And inclusion we define as the full engagement of individuals, sharing power, and participating in all aspects of the organization, okay? Where they can bring their true selves fully to their work. And then the little picture here, I love that little picture because a lot of people confuse equality and equity. And it really is about equity, not equality. So the picture on the left is equality, right? You have three, an adult, a kid, and a little kid in a wheelchair. They can't see. They're trying to watch the game without paying. Should get tickets. But anyway, so the equal solution was they all got a little stool the same size. It still didn't solve the problem, right? The picture to the right is equity, where you actually take into account the unequal starting points and you do something about leveling the playing field from an opportunity perspective. And for us, DEI is not about a commitment on results, it's about a commitment on opportunity, okay? Very different. And I think part of what got this whole theme into trouble is the fact that people are starting to actually get entitlement into DEI, okay? Any questions so far? Very clear? Good. Okay. So what's going on, right? I said, we termed this, the platform is burning. There's too many companies that want to do this, but they fall into the trap of complacency, resistance to change, confusing failure for success, okay? And I'm gonna mention some names of companies that, really fell into that. And it doesn't only happen with the topic of DEI, but across the board. Kodak, you guys remember Kodak? When digital photography came in, Kodak had a Kodak moment. That was their motto, right? Have a Kodak moment. Except that they missed it completely. They could have owned digital photography, but they failed to move, okay? Nokia. Remember the cell phones? They were the best in the world, right? Except they missed the new, of course, Apple came up with something that was revolutionary, not because they're the best phones in the world, but they really have an ecosystem that you can't compete with. So, but Nokia fell from the face of the earth, really. So many companies like that because of complacency, don't actually take the next steps. And I think we're going to see that in a big, big, big way with AI coming into our lives. So take a note of that. And then I have throughout this presentation, I have a few quotes that I really like. Remember, we talked to 150 people, right? But some of the numbers are incredible, right? So there are more corporate CEOs in the US that are named John or David. One of them's here. Right? David, which, yeah. But seriously, more Johns or Davids than female CEOs. Think about that, okay? And by the way, those two names are popular, but there's hundreds of names, right? So anyway, that's an issue. That other metric, men are 30% more likely than women to be promoted within the company to the managerial level. Still in 2025, okay? There's only 52 female CEOs, which by the way has grown significantly. It used to be 27 3 years ago in the Fortune 500. Only 8 Black CEOs and only 17 Latino CEOs, right? In the US, the Latino population will soon be at 25, going to 30% of the population. So if it were just by the numbers, we should have 25 to 30% CEOs. Now, part of the excuse is, well, we don't know where to find them, which, by the way, it's BS. I'm not going to spell BS. Most of you know what that means, so I don't need to spell it. But seriously, part of the problem is people continue to look in the same places, right? So the qualifications for a board member or for a CEO was they need to live near where I live, they need to play golf in my country club, and they need to have gone to this or that school and look like me. Okay, if that's your criteria, of course, you're not going to find diverse candidates. So we need to shift where we're looking. It's one of the first things that we go need to do. I love this quote from Yosen that says, why is Silicon Valley the most innovative place on earth? Because our talent comes from 130 countries. I live in Nashville. I lived in Silicon Valley for 39 years, was involved both in corporate world, in tech, and in the entrepreneur world. And I moved to Nashville 5 years ago, and they're trying to replicate Silicon Valley, right, from an entrepreneurship perspective. And it's very difficult because they don't have that diversity, nowhere near. I mean, there's some great companies. I was at a conversation about a month ago when somebody was presenting, and they had a great quote. They said, Nashville has the same number or more entrepreneurs and creative people than Silicon Valley. We just call them musicians. So anyway, different way to interpret innovation. And this other one from Coco Brown. Any of you know Coco Brown or the Athena Alliance? All right, Coco's fantastic. Athena Alliance is an organization that helps. It used to be focused on only getting women to boards. It's way broader now, much bigger. And she's absolutely right. She said, as culture and market oversight, organizational design, and people risk begin to take the front seat in leadership, so will women. And I'm going to shift that a little bit. So it's not just women, but it's the feminine traits that both women and men can have. It's about EQ rather than just IQ. It's about empathy. It's about a broader comprehension of issues and people. Okay. Clues to inclusion. So what effects, and this is what we found in the book. Obviously, by the way, everybody that wanted to talk to us was in favor of DEI, okay? I think the people that, I think we only had like 3 or 4 no's when we asked people to interview them. And those people were probably not supportive, but the people that talked to us, we're all in favor, right? And what they told us was that, you have a better chance of getting better talent if you're diverse, because you have more access to talent. You have more informed and enhanced decision-making because you have multiple points of view, diverse points of view, rather than homogeneity, which is great. And that you could more closely represent the customer base that you had, another positive. And typically you have more engaged employees, because one of the things that we found is Whenever there was the only in a company, it was very difficult for that person to actually really feel like they belong. And so by the only, I mean the only woman, the only Latino, the only Black person, the only gay person, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to avoid the only, right? Is it possible to demonstrate the effects of the bottom line? And these are significant numbers, right? There's a study done by Intel that looked at companies that had inclusion of both females and different ethnic groups. And if they extrapolated that, and if more companies did that, it would create up to $570 billion of increased value in the nation. I'd like to get one of those, just one. So leave them 569. I'll keep the other one and be happy for the rest of my life. But seriously, 570 billion. That's more than the GDP of many, many countries. Okay. This is incremental. This is not total. Okay. And there was another study by Gallup that companies that had higher than average gender diversity in their senior teams showed between 46 and 58% better performance financially than those that were below the median. Okay, so not 3%, not 5%, somewhere around 50%. Okay, so part of the message on our book, the first book, was even if you don't believe in DEI as being the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. So go ahead and do it. All right, that was kind of our call to action. All right. Okay, so there's a quiz here for you guys. All right. I'll let you read some of these things. You know, the economic indicators that really matter is a study of 74 companies show that immigrants handily outperformed their native counterparts when it came to innovation, even after accounting for the fact that they were better educated. And that is actually seen by number of patents, number of new product introductions, et cetera, across those 7,400 companies. The contribution of high-skilled immigrants to innovation is large. So patents, value of patents, product, et cetera. 16% of groups studied were immigrants. They were responsible for 30% of the innovation. So 2x their participation in numbers from a number of patents done. And then the other one is 30% of US inventors are immigrants. Okay, pretty significant. I wish I could say most of them were Latinos, but actually I don't know that data. But anyway, it's immigrants. And then let's see, this is a test. Alexander Graham Bell, you know, the phone. Where is he from? Who knows that? Wow. Scotland. Who shops at Nordstrom's? Yeah, a bunch of people. Where is John Nordstrom from? He's Swedish. Okay. Where is that? Einstein. Well, you probably all know that. So Pierre Omidyar from eBay. He's the founder of eBay. He's actually French of Iranian parents. Okay. Jerry Wang, Yahoo. Taiwanese. My point here is all of these are immigrants. In many cases, sons of immigrants. Okay. So the world of innovation in this country has been fueled by people who are either first generation Americans or just came to this country for the first time, or maybe at most second generation. Okay. And many companies that most people I think are very American actually were founded by immigrants. Procter & Gamble, DuPont, Colgate, Kraft, Honeywell, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So part of the goal here is we need to get a few Latinos in that list so I can do the quiz with, do you recognize these names? All right. There's a couple of quotes that I really like, so I put them there to break me speaking. I'll let you read them. But they're very true, right? I love the last one. The CHRO from Intel said, when I'm asked to make the business case for diversity, I say, you make the business case for homogeneity. A good answer, right? It's very true. And the top one, it's no accident that this is the strongest economy in the world, referring to the US economy. In many ways, we are strengthened by a cyclical pattern. Immigrants, not just random immigrants, but those who are the most ambitious, the risk takers, choose to come here. When they're included, their enthusiasm and loyalty feed the economic growth, which in turn makes the country more attractive to others like them. So it's a virtuous cycle of more and more immigrants coming in, doing the kinds of things that you guys will do, create economic value, creating opportunities, and that brings more and more and more immigrants. Okay. Changing the guard. So age, I already talked about age, right? It's significantly different, the way different age groups interact, the way the different age groups need to be marketed to, the way they buy, et cetera, et cetera. Keep that into account. 216 of the Fortune 500 companies were founded by an immigrant or a child of an immigrant. And this is a key question now, right? Is our political climate creating a major problem for the future? So we've swung from pillar to post when it was the thing to do to be diverse, inclusive, to now it's almost like a swear word, right? I was joking with somebody the other day. I said, if I wrote my book now, I'd be in jail, right? Because, the gender thing, there's a verified wage gap between men and women. That's not news for anybody. It's closing. It's true, not closing fast enough. What can we do about it? And then, of course, gender, it's confusing, right? There's many definitions. And part of the question is, what do you do about it, right? There's an executive order that basically says there's two and only two and blah, 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 going back to the binary world. But, we look around and that's not the case, right? So how do we acknowledge that? How do we work that into our companies is important. And it's super important to train, especially leaders. We all have unconscious biases. Does everybody know what that means, right? So you kind of you're predisposed to make an assessment based on your background, on your history, your experience, before you even know the truth, right? There's a saying that says, you assess a person in the first 7-8 seconds of interaction with them. Well, guess what? If you do that, we're really assessing from whatever biases you already have. You're not taking the time to really get to know them. So the trick is how you become aware of these unconscious biases and actually deal with them, right? Make sure they don't permeate every decision that you're making. Okay, so how do you start working around getting around that problem? A lot of it starts in the recruiting processes in your company. If you are only looking at certain resumes, like I said, if you're only looking at people from certain schools, et cetera, no wonder that you're going to have very little diversity. Been told to hurry up, so I'm going to move to. All right, you can make these presentations available, right? So, all right. Okay, the intersection of corporate world and public policy is problematic. 5 years ago, like I said, DEI was a hot topic. Now it's almost taboo. So what are we going to do about that? It's important. The political dialogue today around immigration is very conflictive and convoluted, especially for Central and South Americans, and of course, Middle Easterns even worse, right? But what are we going to do? And are we causing a brain drain in this country? We might, right? By the way, 50% of graduates in STEM at our universities, 50% are foreigners, okay? And because of the way we're treating visas, we train them, we don't let them work here, we ship them back to our country, become our competitors, really well-trained competitors. That we're doing that to ourselves. Okay. Okay, post-pandemic. This is important. So the second book really deals with this, right? The real ROI, where ROI we define as return on inclusion rather than return on investment. So one of them is post-pandemic, it's a world that is infused with trust issues, right? Work from home and other changes have basically led us to ask again, who do we include? And how do we include, okay? Staring down the stats, is there manipulation in the numbers? We already talked about the people that report, yeah, we're doing great, but not really, right? So are the stats that prove inclusion real? Okay, filters, screens, and other instructions. Do we understand our biases? Do we account for them? How do we deal with it? And by the way, all of this is solvable with training, coaching, mentorship, et cetera, right? But you need to actually be truly take action. It's not just, okay, we're gonna have training, but not really participate. And we need to take trust from imperative to imperiled, right? Actually, we don't need to take it to imperil. It is imperiled now. It used to be imperative. We need to rebuild that trust. And it's not easy with things like people not being present, people working from home, et cetera, et cetera. So what's next? Those in positions of leadership, many of us are there. We can have a material impact on the future, right? Where inclusion today will diminish exclusion in the future. Okay? And for a lot of startups, I'm an LP in several funds. I'm involved with several incubator accelerators in South America and in the US. And I tell the entrepreneurs, I said, start your company inclusive by design. Begin there, because it's a lot easier to do that than try to fix it later. Okay, so be mindful of that. It does produce significant better numbers. Okay, it's the smart thing to do. Now, because of technology, right? Entry-level jobs are going to be impacted by technology in a big way. Unfortunately, the impact is going to be mostly on the people that we care about, female and underrepresented minorities. So what do we do, right? Reskill, train, but you need to start today. Education is a long-term journey, is not an overnight change. So some data, those without a bachelor's degree face a 55% risk of their job being replaced. And those that only have a bachelor's degree, 24%. Okay, so what used to be table stakes, now you need a master's or some other more advanced education where you can actually be more impactful from the get-go. Okay, educate existing employees to be reskilled, and you need to build trust with technology. Don't design a company that will actually be negatively impacted by technology. Design a company that will be positively impacted by technology. It's the only way to truly democratize the world. And Eric Schmidt, the ex-CEO of Google, had a nice quote that I like. He says, society at large should take steps to close the gaps that it has created, be it poverty, direct or indirect discrimination, and the lack of access to education. In the world of artificial intelligence, the delta is going to be access to education. Okay? That's going to be what makes a difference. And it doesn't need to be formal education, but education at large. In closing, so my goal was to produce a different thinking for the audience, and hopefully at least one person is inspired to act now and take definitive steps towards a more inclusive world. Hope I've been able to show you the benefits of that. So with that, if there's time, we'll do Q&A. Thank you. Yes.
Fantastic talk. One observation and one question.
Mm-hmm.
The list you have of famous people, the millennials that you spoke about don't really care about those dinosaurs. They care more about people like Jose Feliciano.
Yes. Good friend of mine.
For him.
Yeah. Not only that, but Latino. Yeah.
As a Latino organization, whether LBAN or Activist, what is the single largest challenge that you see in this present environment? And how do you overcome it?
That's a great question. And I think, it's funny. I'm on a number of nonprofit boards, and all of them that have to raise funds to continue and improve. And One of my observations was, first of all, most Latinos are not very philanthropic, which is a problem. Okay. Second is, I'll be very, I'm Peruvian, I'm gonna give you money if it's for the Peruvians. I'm Colombian, I'm gonna give you money for the Colombians. I'm, et cetera, et cetera. And that is tremendously problematic, right? I've been involved with the Indian people in the US. We have these, artificial boundaries, right? So the only difference between Peruvian and Colombian is there's a line that says, here is where the two countries end. That's it. While in India, there's 130 religions, right? There's 130 dialects, which are something that is much more important to be together, but they are phenomenally connected when they do anything in favor of India. So to me is step up. We're all Hispanics, participate. There's a, high tech has a great, how many people know or belong to high tech? A lot, right? Pull up and push up, okay? We need to do that. Those of us who are in the positions where we can help others, we need to do that. And I don't see it as much as I would like to see it. I don't know if I answered your question, but that to me is the most important thing in the future. By the way, Elban is great. Arturo Casares is my classmate at Stanford. We studied exactly the same thing. And he does a great job. That's a great organization. Other questions? John.
Amazing presentation. One of the things that comes to mind when I go on LinkedIn, I see, especially within the last 6 to 8 months, a lot of people being let go, a lot of restructuring happening, a lot of changes with AI, a lot of DEI roles no longer being prioritized. What do you say to somebody who spent their whole career doing something like DEI and super passionate, but now they have to reskill? Like, where does somebody who was in that niche, what do they do next?
Yeah, so good point. And I'm going to make two comments. One, you mentioned AI, and I said it's interesting because I've been involved with AI since the mid 80s, right? And now not, generative AI is new, but AI has been around forever. I actually call it a 60-year instant success. And, I was at a presentation and, one of talks like this about AI, and somebody raised their hand and said, I'm very concerned that AI is going to replace my job. And I told the person, I said, you should not be concerned about AI replacing your job. You should be concerned about the person who knows AI replacing your job. So get conversant, get comfortable with using it, with understanding how it can impact your job to actually make it more efficient, optimize it. To me, AI is human assist in a big way, but it's completely changing the way we interact with computers, we as humans. Before you need to be a data scientist to actually do some of the queries that you can just go and say, what about X, right? And then improve it. So to me, it's like reskill, right? On the DEI front, I think these are the things that kind of swing from pillar to post over time. I'm sure it will come back. And I really think that the essence of DEI, and I think I've shown you some of the numbers. The numbers are not insignificant. It will continue to exist. We might need to change, call it something else. But the concept of we want to represent the best in our companies, and by the way, the best come from all different walks of life, right? I use a lot of lessons from sports in the way that I led companies, in the way when I consult with people, and it's the absolute meritocracy, right? If you play at a high level, right? With kids, everybody plays the same amount of time. That kind of drives me crazy. But at a high level, if you're not good, you're out. And if you're good, it doesn't matter what you are. It's all about your performance. So I would say to people, get excellent at what you do. If your world and you're passionate about this whole concept of DEI, find a way to do it without the label. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Mhm. Yeah. 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 So great question. And I'll answer by way of an example. Marcelo said, I run an LX Council CEO mastermind group in Nashville. And one of the members of my group is the CEO of the YMCA. Okay. Massive organization, right? They get about $1.6 billion of aid from the government, right? And there's this executive order that says thou shall eliminate your DEI programs, right? And so his question was, same question, what do I do, right? And the problem is that you have what the law supposedly says, you have what society pushes you to do, because he was saying, there's other companies that are doing this, and by the way, they don't have to abide by the executive order given the type of company they are. But the biggest problem was within the employees, right? Where you have people who, if you change your DEI programs, will go, now, did you abandon me? Right? Like you said, am I comfortable in this company now or am I not? So the conclusion was continue to do what you're doing, right? Get the grassroots, get down to the employees. What we recommended him, and this group's basically all the CEOs recommend what to do, was don't you be, the CEO, don't you be the voice of this. Have your employees be the voice of why this is so important. And the why accepts everybody, right? I think they're a Catholic organization. They're certainly a religious organization. It doesn't matter. They accept everybody, and they need to continue to do that. So my recommendation is continue to do, if you believe in it, continue to do what you're doing. I think the winds of politics are going to change, and so wait it out, right? And when I first moved to Nashville, this is, by the way, I think I apply to a lot of things now. They say, if you don't like the weather, wait 20 minutes. I think we need to do that with DEI. Anyway, I think I'm out of time. Thank you so much for letting me come. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jorge. This is such an interesting and important conversation. I know that we could spend a lot of time, we should spend a lot of time talking about this, so I hope that we can have you back. We are running a little behind schedule, so we're gonna give everybody 10 minutes. Lunch is right outside. Serve yourself a plate, come back. In true entrepreneur fashion, we're gonna work through lunch and have some great conversations coming up. So let's go grab some lunch and come right back.